everyone. We're going to get started tonight. Doug Stevens is going to talk about organic gardening, and Tracy Goodman has some stuff she's going to talk about with composting. Is that correct? Okay. All right, I'm glad to see everybody out this evening.
You're through already, huh?
I'm camera shy.
Okay, I don't believe that. Let's see. Let's see.
Oh yes, I want to let everybody know too that we're going to have green beans and corn tonight, so make sure you get that. And then there's some potatoes and onions outside, and if nobody got a hoe, they're outside also.
Yeah. Okay, good to see, almost see everybody tonight. I can't really see you. It's a little bit dark, but it's really hard to talk about just organic gardening and not repeat a lot of the things that we talked about last month as well. But I'm going to try to do that as little as possible to repeat things. But if y'all are like me, the more you hear something, the more likely you are to actually remember it. So I just have to base what I do on myself. So when you hear people talking about how many people in here, when you go to the grocery or Walmart or wherever you buy your groceries, how many actually look in the organic section for buying some things? Let me see your hands.
It's expensive. I look, but it's the
Okay. I do. And, you know, it is a little bit more expensive. And a lot of people kind of shy away from it because of that. But if you start looking at the big picture of how chemicals and pesticides and all that kind of stuff affects our health, probably in the long run, it's better to pay a little bit more for organic produce and remain healthy than to buy the normal and potentially harm your health. But the best option is not to buy it at the grocery, but to grow it yourself. And that's what we're here to try to show you a few little techniques and how you can actually grow an organic garden or organic produce in your garden. Obviously, if you're buying it from the grocery, in order for them to say it's organic, it has to be certified organic. And the certification process and all the hoops that they have to jump through is what causes that produce to be a little higher than conventionally grown stuff. So, but anyway, we can grow the same stuff. It won't have the certified organic label, but it'll be just as good, right? Okay. So, organic gardening is an emphasis of the Grow Appalachia program, and apparently I didn't go through this good enough to know I had to click a lot. So, why is that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about the whole rest of this program. If you have any questions, stop me, okay, and ask rather than wait till the end, because if you're like me, you'll forget what you wanted to ask.
Is there handouts for this?
There are. I don't. I think that they just did the one, but I'm sure Rhonda is going to actually post the PowerPoint PDF on or send it to everyone, right?
Yes.
Okay, so everything that's on the slides you will have access to.
We also did a printout, so they'll have a hard copy to put in their binders for you to take home.
Okay, and the thing that we're going to hand out now, really all that information is on it, but it's not in a PowerPoint format, but it'll be a good resource to look back at. So, what is organic gardening? Well, there's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is that it means not using synthetic products like chemical fertilizers and pesticides and that kind of thing. So, and most of us have an understanding about what those are. There are fertilizers and pesticides that are certified for organic use, but there's a lot of difference in the way that those things are. The fertilizer that you will eventually be getting through the Grow Appalachia program is a certified organic product. Okay, this method, organic gardening, actually, while it's using the resources to nourish the plant, the processes that we do in organic gardening replaces those things. So you're not really depleting the resources, the minerals, all that's in your garden. Okay, the bigger picture, if you wanted to get a real technical definition of organic gardening, it's an earth-friendly method of gardening. So it's not going to harm the environment. Plants are grown in natural ecosystems without the use of harmful chemicals, which we already really said. And it's based on the principles of ecology. And I don't know if I can even read that. Mimics and amplifies natural ecosystems. So, you know, you can't go out into the woods, that being a natural ecosystem, and plant your garden. You have to modify that, but you mimic the same processes that go on, but in your garden area, you might try to amplify that or accelerate it so that you get the benefit of that organic material. I guess you don't point at the screen. Okay, so instead of using chemical fertilizers, we feed the soil that feeds the plants. So with organic fertilizers, you may be providing some nutrients for the plants themselves that they'll take up from the roots, but the bigger picture is you're providing nutrients for that ecosystem that's in the soil, and an intact ecosystem is better for your plants to be able to uptake nutrients that it needs. So instead of using chemical fertilizers, we feed the soil. And there's a lot of ways to feed the soil. And instead of applying synthetic pesticides, like 7 and all that most of us probably have used, right? We rely on a healthy plant, and the plant's bigger, and we also rely on natural pest control to keep pest control under control. So we try to do something to make the plant healthier so that it will resist a pest or a disease, and that's a better solution, I think. Healthy plants are not as impacted by pests as weak, stressed plants. If your plants get stressed, not enough moisture, they're not healthy enough because you don't have enough nutrients in the soil. I don't think they send out a signal, but the pest organisms automatically know that, and they attack that plant. So it's kind of nature's way of cleaning up the sick and unhealthy ones. So the remedy for that is keep your plants healthy, and the pests won't affect it as much. Again, I'm doing the same thing. Okay, the problem with chemicals is that chemicals simplify ecosystems. What do I mean by that? If you use a nitrate salt fertilizer, which if you go down to the store, box store, and you buy a 10-10-10 or a 12-12-12, that's generally a nitrate salt type fertilizer, a chemical fertilizer. What happens if you do that? You can kiss the beneficial fungus in your soil goodbye, and pretty much the earthworms head for really deep or out of the garden because they don't like that. So you're running off the soil organisms which are helping your soil be productive for a good garden. If you apply an insecticide, parasitic wasps that control pests like aphids and those chewing caterpillars that eat everything, the parasitic wasps tend to be the first things that die. We'll talk about those a little bit more shortly. And the pollinators and the other beneficial insects also die. So if you're using some kind of a synthetic pesticide, you got to be real careful that you only spray during certain conditions and certain times of the day, because if you spray while the pollinators, like the honeybees, are there, you're going to end up killing those things as well. So it becomes a little bit more challenging. Okay. So before, now believe it or not, synthetic fertilizers and synthetic pesticides weren't always around, right? Back years, a generation or two back, what people did in their backyard garden would be very much considered organically grown produce, and based on today's standards, right? Or at least they utilize the basic methods of growing organically. Tell me what they did. What did your grandparents used to do, or great-grandparents, when they grew a garden? They used manure, and actually they probably had a good compost pile, kept their through their kitchen scraps in certain places. Most every home had chickens, so using the chicken manure, or shovel out the
Hand-picked the snail or the snails and stuff off of the food.
Right. Well, you go out and hand-pick the pests off of that. You kill the eggs of the pests before so they had to do stuff like that. Today's idea of what organic gardening was actually founded in the mid-20th century by a guy by the name of Rodale, and this is one of his books that he wrote. You can't really see it very well there, but he was kind of the father of, if you will, of organic gardening. And there's several books that have all the general basic information about organic gardening. But it didn't really become mainstream right away when he started talking about it and promoting it. It's years later. Now you go to Knoxville and you go around Whole Foods, you might have a hard time finding a parking place, that kind of thing. A lot of people are actually going out and buying organic produce, but a lot of people are also raising their own food organically. Okay. So highly regarded. I have to know what this says. So the primary thing that organic gardening focuses on is the soil. And a healthy soil is vitally important if you're going to raise good plants. A healthy soil is a soil that's full of nutrients, has lots of organic material, has microorganisms and larger organisms like earthworms and those kind of things. A healthy soil has good drainage, so it's not retaining water and becoming standing water, and even though it has good drainage, it also retains a good amount of water and nutrients, and it allows air circulation around the roots of the plants. So it's kind of light and fluffy, if you will, with air spaces in there. So a healthy soil creates the perfect environment for organisms to thrive so they can break down organic material and aerate the soil. How does an earthworm aerate the soil? Well, I didn't hear that.
Doesn't it eat it, digest it?
Right, it's like if you put compost on the surface of the soil, that earthworm is going up and getting that, and then, it's got tunnels all down below it, so, it's creating those air spaces in there. So if you want to know if your soil is good and healthy, after a rain, go out at night and see if you got night crawlers and redworms coming to the surface. I mean, that's a good indicator, really is. And if it's not, what do? Add organic material. Yeah, get some earthworms, right?
My dad did my dad and my brother actually got night crawlers
right?
and put in the garden. So there's a lot of them, and it's amazing at what they do for flower beds and gardens.
It really is.
Actually went and got some.
Yeah. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Go to your neighbor's house that's got good soil, get it and bring some over. With their knowing about it though, right? Not going over with a flashlight after dark and stealing their night crawlers. Okay, a healthy soil has good tilth. What's tilth? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Well, we'll talk about it now. It's the physical condition of the soil, especially in relation to its suitability for planting or growing a crop. So it talks about the physical characteristics, and we already said a few of those things, but we'll look at it a little closer in a second. Factors that determine tilth include the formation and stability of aggregated soil particles. Everybody understands exactly what I meant when I said that, right? I didn't think so. So you got different sized soil particles. You don't have all clay, for example. Clay is just a real fine particle. If you had all clay and not a mixture of different sized soil particles, then it's more compacted, so you don't have good tilth. Think about tilth in terms of, if you can stick your hands down in it without a lot of effort and just, it feels kind of soft and fluffy. That makes sense? You got a better definition, John? I'm kind of at a loss. Okay. It has good moisture content, doesn't dry out, doesn't lose all the moisture in a day's time, right? It has some degree of aeration and the rate of water infiltration and drainage. So it has good drainage, but it retains moisture because of the organic material that's in it. It's got different soil size particles and just fun to be at. It smells good too. I don't know if it tastes very good, but but it does smell good. So the tilth of the soil can change rapidly depending on environmental factors, such as if you have like a flood that just kind of comes in and just compacts, or running a tractor over it, or walking on it, or driving your vehicle on it, or whatever, some kind of compaction. So it could change pretty drastically, pretty fast. I'm not sure what that picture is supposed to be. But if you've got like clay soil and it doesn't have very good tilth, you could add organic material and then till that in. And initially that tilling in will improve the tilth, the overall physical condition of the soil. But if you continually use a rototiller to till your garden, I used to when I first started doing gardening, that's the way I would weed. Run a rototiller right through the pathway between the plants, and it does get rid of the weeds temporarily, but what you're doing is you're disturbing the soil ecosystem, and you're moving that organic material around, and it just kind of degrades really fast and doesn't, leaves the soil, and you end up having a powdery soil that doesn't retain water very well and has very little organic material. So continual tilling is not necessarily good. A lot of even commercial farmers, a lot of them are going to no-till or minimal till in their garden. So for the purpose of what we do in our home backyard garden, sometimes it's hard to get a tiller, or you don't want to pay a lot for it. If you can get that soil in good condition to begin with, and then treat it a certain way by adding mulches and making sure you don't drive on it or walk on it or to compact it, you can get by without tilling and actually be better off in the long run. Still talking about soil. Contains an abundance of organic material, organic matter. And that's decaying plant and animal waste. right? I mean, manures, grass clippings, straw, kitchen scraps, all that kind of stuff just put into the garden. Compost, obviously. I won't say that word too much because Tracy's going to talk about it. Okay, but you can improve the amount of organic material by inputting organic material, compost and mulch. Everybody know the difference between a compost and a mulch. You can actually use compost, which has gone through a heating process and is not completely broken down, but it's very much broken down organic material. You can usually incorporate that into the soil, and it's good. A lot of mulches you need to put on the surface of the soil and not work it into the soil, because if you work it in, it could utilize all the nitrogen that your plant would need, because the bacteria that are working to break down that mulch, like wood chips or something like that, would be using nitrogen in their physiological processes. So I'm digging a hole. I'll get out of that one quick. But you can use compost in addition to incorporating it into the soil. You can use it for a mulch, and that's a good way to do it. What does it do if you put it up a couple inches of compost on top of your soil around your plants? What will that do? Well,
Allow the rain to take your minerals and good things down further into the soil.
right. When it rains, it'll go down. The earthworms come up. Other soil organisms are getting that and pulling it down into the soil, right? But it's also, if you've got a couple of inches of it, it's creating a sunblock, if you will. The sunlight's not getting to the soil, so the weed seeds are not as likely to germinate. So you're providing nutrients, plus you're minimizing your weed seed germination. And you can never have too much compost. Well, you could. You can totally cover the plant up, but I think any amount that you get to put on a garden is going to be a good thing. Okay, I can't read that.
Inputs to increase organic matter would be use grass clippings, dried leaves, straw, not hay,
Okay.
and mulches.
So using grass clippings, anybody in here use grass clippings in your lawn? I mean, in your in your garden. Yeah, I mean, it's really good. I mean, I've got a cousin that's what they do. They use a push mower to mow their lawn, got a grass catcher, and they'll put that out there in the walkways, whatever. But it's always good to mow your lawn regularly so that the weeds that may be in there, that they don't go to seed, and you input weed seed or grass seed necessarily into your garden. So that's a good thing. Is it good to incorporate green, just fresh mowed grass clippings into the soil? Probably not. It's the same thing. It would be, the bacteria and so on would go into breaking that down really quick, and you might end up having a depletion of your nitrogen, right? Straw is a really good one. A bale of straw costs quite a bit these days. I think the last time I bought some, it was about $8 for a bale of straw. But if you put something like that in it, use straw, not hay.
Why would you use straw, not hay, when straw is sprayed?
Okay, know where your straw come from is a good thing if you're looking at organic, because it could be sprayed.
Because that's what I'm hearing, is that most of the straw around here is hay, sprayed, where the hay isn't.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, where I get it.
Yeah, most straw is either wheat or barley, right? And a lot of that's planted in the fall when you don't have a lot of others, and you got a real thick stand of that plant. So I don't know that they spray it usually it grows in the wintertime and you don't have as many pests that affect anything like that. So I'm not sure, but if they've used it, pesticides or whatever, and you don't want that in your organic garden,
Right.
then you need to be real careful about where you get it.
But you don't want to use hay.
Don't-
Hay's got seeds in it.
Right. Don't want to use hay because a hay field has got all kinds of plants, weeds that you don't want in your garden. Okay, I had not just hay, but fresh horse manure,
Well, that'll burn.
because those seeds, well, I mean, you can incorporate it in, not planting it until later on, but a horse eats the hay and it passes through its digestive system, and those seeds are happy when they come out the other side. So they will germinate and contaminate your garden. So I don't know if seeds are happy, but you know what I mean. Okay. Okay, cover crops. We're going to talk about cover crops later on. Anybody know what a cover crop is? It's basically a good way to incorporate organic material into your garden soil. At any time that you're not growing plants, well, anytime you're not growing garden plants, vegetables or whatever, it's always good to plant a cover crop because something is going to grow in that soil. It's best to be a ubiquitous, pure stand of whatever cover crop that you're growing, rather than a bunch of weeds popping up, because nature is not going to let that soil stay bare. Okay, so a cover crop, you would plant some kind of like an annual clover. I planted last fall, I planted winter wheat and crimson clover, which is just an annual. And they establish themselves during the winter, and then in the spring they start growing really fast, and completely cover it and smother out any weeds or whatever. But you want to cut that cover crop and incorporate it into the soil before it goes to seed, or else you'll have a lot of those seeds in there, and they would serve as weeds as well. Make sense? So again, we'll talk about cover crops later. It's something that I never really used until the last couple of years, and it makes a big difference. So I have no idea why that's way down like that. But weeding, how do you weed in an organic garden? If you can't spray a herbicide or whatever, well, let's see. Don't use herbicides. You use elbow grease instead. Everybody knows what elbow grease is, right? Okay, hard work. You prevent weeds by using mulches, like I was talking about, right? But if you get weeds come up, don't wait till they grow up and mature. Get them while they're small. Why do we get them while they're small? They're easier to pull out. Easier to pull out, or they're easier to hoe. Here's a little trick. Always pull weeds after a rain, because the soil is softer and easier. That whole root will come out. If it's dry and you try to pull it out, guess what's going to happen?
The root stays.
The root stays and the plant breaks off, and it'll be right back in just a day or two. But if you're going to hoe, remember what we said last month, don't chop deep to get the weeds out, just scrape the surface. Again, we're still trying to get them when they're small. Do it when it's hot and dry. So get out in the middle of the day when the sun's shining and you sweat a whole lot while you're doing it, because when you rake that and cut that weed or even uproot the small roots, they immediately wither and die. If you go out there and try to do that right before you have a rain, what's going to happen?
You're going to reroot.
They'll reroot, and that happens to me all the time. So I'm telling you what to do. So do as I say, not as I do. Okay.
Silage tarps.
Oh, silage tarps. How about I just say black plastic?
Okay. I was going to say, does it matter if it's like one of those blue plastic tarps that you cover like?
Just basically, I think black would probably heat up what's underneath it faster. What you're trying to do by covering it with plastic, you keep the moisture out,
Right.
but you input more heat in because of the sun shining on it. So it, initially it may be warmer and may cause weed seeds to germinate, but then as it gets hotter, it'll go ahead and kill those same weeds.
Well, the reason I I asked about that is because silage tarps, I've been pricing them and they are outrageous.
They are. The difference is you get a silage tarp, it's a lot thicker, and it's, it'll stand up under all kinds of weather. Of course, deer walking on it still make holes in it. I can tell you that for sure. But I had 2 garden plots that all I did was staked out a silage tarp, which was about a 35 by 40. Staked it out, put some sandbags on the edges of it so the wind wouldn't blow it away, and just put it right on the grass in the field, in the area where I was going to make a garden. And it did a very effective job at killing out some really noxious weeds, grasses like Johnson grass and some other things like that. So it pretty much left that sterile. Now, if you do that, and then you go in and till it, you've got seeds back up there high enough on the surface that they're probably going to do it again. So if you till it, cover it up again for a period of time with that tarp or that plastic, and it'll kill those as well. So then you incorporate your organic material in and go with the mulches and all that, and you should be in pretty good shape. But it's just it's a quick and easy way to kill weeds without using too much elbow grease. Okay, pest control. There's some places in the world that will pay more for produce or an apple that has bug bites in it than they would one that looked perfect. Why do you think that is? Because haven't been sprayed with chemicals. So controlling pests the organic way is a little bit harder than going out there and spraying some pesticide or some insecticide, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to share all your produce with the worms, all your apples with the worms, for example. But it does mean that your produce may not look as pretty and shiny as somebody else's, but it'll be a lot healthier for you. So we learn to accept the occasional pests. So the occasional pest is not a big deal. But if you don't keep your eyes open and be vigilant, then that pest population could increase to the point that it becomes a real problem. So what we recommend doing is go out there and inspect your garden on a regular basis. How many have been out one day looking at your tomato plants and everything looks really good? The next day you go out and there's like whole sections of the plant that's gone, been defoliated by a tomato hornworm. Okay, they were there before, but once they get to a certain size and a certain number of them, they can destroy plants in a short period of time, for example.
Is there a place around, because I was just thinking about the hornworms. I heard that if you go out at night with a black light, that the hornworms shine so that you can actually pick them off easier?
Yeah, that does work. And I'd recommend doing it.
Around here to get black lights like that?
Maybe at Walmart. I ordered one off of Amazon.
Okay.
You can get them, and they're not very expensive. I got a pretty powerful black light for about $11 or something like that. So we'll talk about that. Anybody?
Love hornworms.
Oh, I heard that.
You can what?
Chickens love them.
Oh yeah, they do.
I've got 50 chickens, so they can eat as much as they want.
They'll go crazy for them.
Yeah. Okay. So, but the thing we got to remember, every time you see a bug, insect in the garden, that's not a bad thing, because a lot of those insects out there are beneficial, and Sean's going to talk to us about those later on. I'll mention just a little bit, just to give you, get you hungry for more information that he's going to give us next time. Okay. Okay, there are organically certified pesticides like spinosad or spinosad, some people say. I've used spinosad. It's actually a bacteria that you spray. I've used it on cabbage that was severely attacked by, I guess, the cabbage loopers or whatever. And overnight it stops them. What it is, it's a bacteria. You put it on the leaf, spray it on the leaf, and once it dries, if that caterpillar starts eating that leaf, it gets that bacteria in its gut, and that bacteria will kill it. But everything else can, once it's dry, everything else can land on it or whatever. Ladybugs and praying mantis and honeybees can walk all over it and whatever, and it doesn't cause any problem. It's just when they start chewing that plant, they get that bacteria in their gut, and that'll kill them. It's very effective. I've used it on cabbage. Of course, all the cabbage-related things, broccoli and cauliflower and all that are subject to those, but also bean bugs and potato bugs. Does a really good job. For me, some people say that they have to kind of alternate. I don't overuse it. Like my cabbage a couple of years ago when I used it, I sprayed it one time and that eliminated my problem. My potato bug problem, I had to spray it one time, and about 2 or 3 weeks later, I had to put another application on, and that took care of my problem for the rest of that year. So it works really good. And I think if you took 7 dust and went out there and made your potato plant completely white, you're still not going to get rid of all the potato bugs. They've kind of developed an immunity to those kind of things. So, but anyway, neem oil is an oil, I guess, created from the neem plant, and it's a it's a good pesticide, but it's also somewhat of a fungicide as well. Neem oil will actually, if you spray your cabbage or whatever with neem oil, the rabbits don't even like to eat it, but it's not harmful to that plant or to you, I don't think. But just don't drink it or or whatever. BT, which is another bacteria, it does about the same thing as spinosad. I've never used BT. Have any of you all used BT before? Bacillus thuringiensis. That's the name of the bacteria. Have you used it, Sean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is it very effective, or?
Yeah, and so that's one where I'm not sure if spinosad might contain BT, but it works the same way where it will bacteria. It works with Lepidoptera moth and caterpillar, like moth and butterfly caterpillars, and when it gets into the gut, that it starts to crystallize and will cause damage to their stomachs, and that's how it kills them.
Right.
So that's one where you just spray it on, and other than rain washing it off, as long as there's a few days for them to eat on it, it will help control them.
Right, and that's what we're looking at. We're looking at not necessarily killing everything out there. We're trying to keep it under control with the organic pest control. So every time you see an insect, don't reach for a spray can and try to kill it, because there's a lot of beneficial insects. We'll talk about that later. Ladybugs, praying mantis, we all know what those are, right? But there's a lot of others. Parasitic wasp, birds. A good couple of guineas running in your garden might be a pretty good thing, because they tend to eat bugs more than they do produce. But
They don't scratch.
And they don't scratch, but they will occasionally eat a tomato. And of course, who wouldn't want to eat a tomato? So anyway, there's a lot of good things out there. Even a snake, not every snake, but a garter snake and green snakes, things like that. A lot of them eat insects, and I know everybody loves to have those in your garden. So, okay, tomato hornworms and the parasitic wasp. You can't see it very good. I think you would be able to if it didn't have all those holes in the picture. But that's the parasitic wasp that actually lays eggs on the tomato hornworm. Everybody knows what a tomato hornworm is, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's a really big, fat, juicy worm that will defoliate your tomato plant in a hurry. The moth that lays the egg for the tomato hornworm is actually it's one of the sphinx moths or hawk moth. It's in that family. Have you ever seen a moth flying around by your flowers and just hovering like a little small hummingbird. Okay, that's not necessarily that species, but that's the hawk moth or sphinx moth family, and that's what they look like, kind of those wing shaped like that. They are catalpa trees. Anybody know what catalpa trees are? Big. Growing up, we always call them tobby worm trees, and they make good fish bait, right? That caterpillar, the catalpa worm or the tobby worm, is a sphinx moth larva that's related to the tomato hornworm. Not the same species, different one. So, but anyway, the parasitic wasp, once that moth lays the eggs on your plant and that hatches out, the parasitic wasp is going around looking for those things, and they lay their eggs inside the skin of the tomato hornworm, and then the eggs hatch, and the larvae of that parasitic wasp actually eat that tomato hornworm from the inside out. Okay? And I know you can't see that picture very good, but if you see one that's got these little white tomato hornworm in your garden that's got this little white cocoon on it, several of them on its back usually, don't pick that thing off and feed it to your chickens, because that's the cocoons that those larval parasitic wasps are emerging from that tomato hornworm, and they're going to hatch out or emerge as adult parasitic wasps that's going to increase the population of that kind of thing in your garden. So if you kill them, then you're eliminating the future generations of parasitic wasps. So that's the thing to look for. Any kind of caterpillar that you see that's got those white cocoons or whatever, it means that there was a parasitic wasp there. Don't kill those. Don't pull those off your plants. At that stage, I mean, if you got something eating you from the inside, you just stay there. You don't eat the tomato plant, right? So any question about those? She mentioned if you want to go out at night with the black light, I mean, those things supposedly stand out really well, and you can pick them off. If I go out and I see damage on my tomato plant, sometimes you have to stand there and look and for a long time before you actually spot one of those things. But if you go out at night with the black light, they stand out like a sore thumb, so to speak.
It's also one where if you go out during the day, if you see damage, you can also look for the caterpillar frass or feces. There'll be little dark green cubes pretty much. And so it's just kind of, it's playing detective as you go through. It's like, all right, there's damage. Oh, there's all these little green dots around. All right, I have one.
Look straight up, right?
kind of follow along, and you'll find it.
Yeah. So, hand picking is a really good way to do it. I have no idea how much. Okay. So I need to be quitting real quick here in a minute. Okay. So another way to control pests, and we'll talk about this briefly, interplanting with companion plants. So in other words, and I'll try to summarize this, I mean, you can cover it up with a row cover, like the picture at the bottom, an insect netting that keeps a lot of those insect adults from coming in and laying eggs on your plants. But you can also plant certain types of plants together, and the one plant might repel the pests. I think a lot of folks around here plant marigolds in with their beans. How many have done that in the past? Okay. I think probably as much as anything else, it kind of masks, the marigolds gives off the smell that the pest that's searching for the beans causes them not to be able to locate the bean plant.
I have in the past planted rosemary with the beans.
Okay.
And I guess the odor from the rosemary will keep the pests away.
Okay, that makes sense too. There's a lot of things that you can plant in there, but interplanting, the idea with interplanting, if you think about it, if I'm planting a huge section of my garden as potatoes, if you've got an insect flying in looking for potatoes and they see a big landing strip right down there. They have access to it. But if you've got a little bit of potatoes planted here and a little bit somewhere else, and you've got other plants planted around them, it kind of confuses the pests. And you may end up, even though you might have some pest damage, you might not lose your whole crop by doing that way. So interplanting is a good thing. Check that out, companion planting. I've got and I'll move on. Anybody ever heard of the Three Sisters method of gardening?
Yeah.
Okay, the Iroquois actually, I guess, devised this, and they used like a field corn, some kind of corn. Of course, they didn't have sweet corn as much, but a field corn and a pole bean and a squash. Okay, so you can actually, the theory behind that is you plant the corn, and once the stalk gets up just a little bit, then you can plant your beans over close to it, and your beans will use that corn stalk to twirl around and climb up. So, but the beans are also providing nitrogen, because the bean family legumes have nitrogen fixing bacteria associated with them, and they can pull nitrogen into the area where your plants can get it out of the soil, right? So it's good to have that. So the beans provide the nitrogen for the corn. The corn provides the stalk for the bean to climb on. And the squash, usually I think probably better like a type of winter squash that has smaller leaves. Plant that and it'll move in and cover the ground, and what that does is it keeps the ground from drying out as much, plus it covers the ground so you don't have a bunch of weeds coming up in that. So it's all three benefit from each other. So you can look at that a little bit more in detail later, but nasturtiums are a good one, marigolds like we said. And I've got a thing here, I can probably send this particular thing to Rhonda and let her send that out when she sends the other stuff, but it shows different plants that do well with other plants that are beneficial. I can't see it good enough to do anything about that. So why grow organically? Better nutrition and tastier food. Why? Why does food taste better grown organically? Because with all the organic input and all that, there's more minerals in the soil, more nutrients. And if you're just putting nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in there, and that they're lacking in a lot of other minerals, the different minerals is what gives a lot of plants flavor. So better soils equal better plants, equal better nutrition. More minerals in the soil, same thing. So nourish the soil, that nourishes the plant, and it nourishes our body. Keeps chemicals off your plate, because the EPA considers about 60% of all herbicides, 90% of all fungicides, and 30% of all insecticides are carcinogenic. You know what that means, right? Different ways that you might want to look at. There's a gentleman in Washington State, if you've ever heard of him, Paul Gauci. He has his technique he calls the back to Eden gardening technique. Basically, he just uses mulches real heavily, but he also incorporates animal waste, namely his chickens and the way that they compost his garden waste. So pretty impressive to watch that. If you got YouTube, look up Back to Eden Garden, and you'll see Paul Gauci, because I can't really tell you how to spell his name right now, but anyway, Back to Eden Gardening. A biggie, that person that really hit, a lot of people really looked at, Square Foot Gardening, Mel Bartholomew. It's a high intensity planting in raised beds with good soil, and he says you can grow more produce in smaller space by doing it in his method than you could grow a huge acreage of a garden. Charles Dowding has what he calls the no-dig gardening, just incorporating a lot of the no-dig techniques into that. So get out there and do it. Grow some organic produce. Sell it at the farmer's market. Nice building here for you all to come and sell produce at, right? Starting when?
And the first day will be June 5th, a Saturday, and then every Saturday after that, going to the end of September. And then also, if you come, there'll be, for Appalachia, we'll have a booth to have stuff. We're going to have, for the opening day, we're going to have ham and goodies from Knoxville, and then Ruth Stew, which is a stir fries, egg rolls. And so it's one where, you get to not only get to, come and sell or buy all kinds of produce, but you get to have lunch as well.
That's pretty good. So Tracy's going to talk to us about compost.
Okay.
Or at least show us something.
I just have a video. This is a design that I have tried myself and works. It's a really, really easy way to build a compost bin. You really don't have to do any building at all because it's made out of a trash can. So that's my kind of building project there. I don't know how good you all will be able to hear this, but...
Hi, I'm Tracy Goodman, and I'm the Agriculture and Natural Resource Extension Agent for McCrae County Cooperative Extension. Today I'm going to show you how to make a very cheap, very easy compost bin. And this is something that I have actually been using all year myself. I made one of these earlier this year. So this container is what we're going to use to make our compost bin out of. Now you can make a compost bin with relatively anything. You can build it out of wood, out of fencing, out of old pallets. Whatever you have laying around will actually work for a compost bin. But if you want something that is already assembled for you, this is a really good option and it's not going to cost you a lot of money. So what I have here is a 20-gallon trash can. I got this for about $9, which is very, very cheap. It has a lid already on it. It's already in the form of a bin. It's ready to go. So the only thing that I need to do for this is to actually drill air holes in it, because this is one thing you want to make sure of, is that your compost pile has access to oxygen and also drainage. You don't want your pile to be too wet, and you don't want it to not have enough airflow, because it's not going to break down properly without those two things. So we have our drill here, which has a 5/16 bit on it. This isn't necessary. You don't have to have one this particular size, but I wanted my holes to be big enough to allow some airflow into the barrel.
You don't have to have that particular size.
And I have a set of bungee cords, which I will show you why we need these in a little bit. And then I also have a pair of safety glasses. These are very important. Protect your eyes always when you're using any type of equipment. So what I'm going to do is drill some holes just randomly all over this trash can and in the bottom of it, so that it will allow that excess moisture to drain out, because again, you don't want your compost pile to be too wet. You want it to be able to drain properly so that everything breaks down the way that it needs to. So we will go ahead and get started. Okay, you can see these holes. They're pretty good size. They're going to be plenty big enough to allow a lot of airflow into this bin and allow moisture to drain out once I put them on the bottom. And you don't need to space them any particular space apart. I'm not scientifically calculating this in any way. You can just drill them randomly all over. And if I don't have enough, or I find that I'm not getting enough airflow, I can always put more into it later on. So we're going to finish putting the holes in it, and then I'll show you what to do after that. So now that we have our barrel done, I have the holes in it that I wanted spaced apart evenly enough so that it'll get a lot of airflow and good drainage. We're going to talk about what we actually put into a compost pile. So compost piles typically need two types of materials. They need brown materials, which are your carbon materials, and they need green materials, which are your nitrogen materials. And I will link a publication in the video description that talks about the specific things that you can and cannot add to a compost pile. This on top of my counter, so when I was chopping up vegetables, I could just throw them in there and then take them out and dump them into the bin. Recently I upgraded to an under the counter bin. It hangs on a bracket on the back of my cabinet door, and I can open this one-handed when I'm chopping stuff. It seals up really nicely, so that is one important thing of how you store your compost scraps. If you're keeping them in the house for a period of time and not taking them out immediately, you want to make sure that you have something that seals, because fruit flies will find this stuff. So you got to have something that seals tightly to keep those fruit flies out of there. So I'm going to show you what I add to my compost bin. Alright, I went ahead and put in some leaves. I filled it about a quarter of the way, third of the way full. And I'm going to take my scraps. I just have some old celery, lemon pieces, it looks like, maybe a couple of old peppers in there. I'm going to dump those in. And typically I would just keep adding to this every day or every other day whenever I want to empty my bin out. And I'll show you what we're going to add to it next. Now remember I said compost bins, compost piles need a little bit of moisture. Now you're going to get, if you use vegetable scraps, you're going to get moisture that comes off of those. But initially, see how dry this is? I'm going to add just a little bit of water to this, and having that right moisture content and airflow is going to help this break down much faster. We're just going to put let it down just a little bit, not too much. And now I'm going to show you how we're going to mix this up, which is the fun part. Okay, so remember we have a lid that goes to this can that came with it. So we're going to put the lid on. And also remember, in our list of materials, we had a set of bungee straps. So I used 3 of them. 2 of them are a little bit shorter, but you can use any size, any number of them that you want to. So what we're going to do is fasten this lid down with these bungee straps. Okay, so now that our lid is on here nice and secure, we get to do the fun part. So this is how we're going to mix our compost bin. Okay, let's look inside. We're all mixed up and definitely ready to start composting. So this is a very cheap, very easy design. This would be perfect for kids. They would love rolling this around your yard, I'm sure. So if you don't have any type of materials to build your compost bin out of, or if you don't know how to build with things, this is so easy. You need a drill. Doesn't matter what kind of drill, what kind of bit, whatever you have. Or it's just something to poke holes in the side of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a drill. You need bungee cords, and you need just a pair of safety glasses if you're working with equipment. And then obviously you need your stuff to put inside of it, which you can find anywhere. So this is a really great project to teach your kids how to utilize waste and turn it into a usable product. So I hope you found this informative, and thank you for watching.
I will send that link out to Rhonda because I know it's hard to hear. But I will say that I have used this. This is what I use for composting at my house, and I've used it for probably the last year. And it's broken down like several times since I've started using it. It does slow down during the winter because it's colder, obviously, and you don't really want to add a ton of vegetable scraps and stuff like that in the wintertime just because it's cold and it's not going to break down the way you want it to. But in the summertime, I mean, it really kicks into high gear in summer. So, and you know, your materials and your ratios and all that, I do have a couple of publications up here on composting that tells you what you can, what you can't add, the ratios of stuff that you want to add to a compost pile. You don't have to use any kind of bin or enclosed thing. You can just pile it up in your yard, but for where I live, where I don't have a lot of space kind of around my house, this is a good option for me because I have it all contained. I have it right beside my house, so I can just take my bin of scraps outside, dump it in there, and then add some dry materials as I need it. That's about it.
Or they keep it in the sun or shade?
I keep it typically in the sun. I mean, my house doesn't get a whole lot of sun, to be honest, because I have a lot of trees, but most of the day it's in the sun.
What kind of brown can you use beside leaves?
You can use straw, sawdust, sometimes newspaper. It's really, really high in carbon, so if you use that, you don't want to use a lot of newspaper clippings, and you generally don't want to use stuff that's got a lot of like the glossy print on it because it's not going to break down as well. But yeah, pretty much anything like that, any kind of dead materials like that would serve as a carbon source.
What would you classify chicken manure as?
Nitrogen.
Okay.
Yep.
I was gonna say, because it's definitely not green.
Yeah. Yeah, that's your nitrogen material, which you don't typically need a ton of that. But yeah, it's a good way to kind of get that started and get your microbes in there and help it start breaking down. Okay, we're done, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Doug, so much for sharing. They will send me the information, and I will get that out to you guys on an email, so be watching for that. Tonight, we're going to pick up green beans and corn. Our next meeting is May the 20th, and we'll see how we're going to run on that, the time frame. I'd like to get us to one meeting where we can all gather and share. We'll just see what happens. So I'll send out emails to let everybody know, if we're going to do two and what time and all of that. And May the 20th, Sean will be teaching us about beneficial insects.